Well, we're going to become increasingly non-biological to the point where the non-biological part predominates and the biological part is not that important anymore.
When it starts to collapse, it's going to happen very fast.
Defeat the globalists who want to shatter your mind!
In the future, the internet will be in your contact lens. You will blink and you will go online.
To create, so to say, mass-produced models of human beings arranged in some kind of a scientific caste system.
There's going to be a revolution. It's totally going to happen.
A new world order.
History is leading toward the transformation of this planet in our lifetime.
You're listening to Themes and Memes, a different kind of movie review podcast. I am your host, Aaron Franz of theageoftransitions.com. Here with me is my co-host, Adam of cerebralrevolt.com. How are you doing today, Adam?
Hello, Aaron. I am well. I'm well as usual. Things are going well, and I'm again interested and excited to get into this next interview and to discuss all of the very, very interesting and poignant, shall we say, themes that have come up in this film that we were reviewing tonight, which is Assault on Wall Street. I'm not sure how many people have seen that.
Probably not too many people.
Yeah. I'm not sure how well it did at the box office. I mean, I hadn't heard of it until you had recommended it to me. So I don't know. I don't know how big a success it was. I probably should have looked that up. But yeah.
Something I'd like to point out just from the beginning here is that I personally don't recommend anybody actually to watch this film. We're going to analyze it and for the important themes and what we usually do here on the podcast. However, I think the film is really bad in a lot of ways, and we'll get into that. And if you want a quick version of the film, if you watch the movie trailer, you'll basically get the entire movie all in the trailer.
Yeah. That's exactly it. And, we discussed this offline earlier on that basically there's no real need to watch the film. If one was to simply watch the trailer, that's it. The whole film and all the plot devices and the conclusion of the film, basically in the trailer, so it's, it's literally the film condensed down to 2.5 minutes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So there's no. I mean, if people want to go and watch it, then fine, But I wouldn't recommend it for a number of different reasons, unless you're a certain, thick-skinned and very critical type of person.
Yeah. Well, one of the reasons that we say it might not be best to watch this film is just because of how emotionally intense it is. I know that we both, watching this film, anybody watching this film is just going to be hit by it. And one thing that this film actually does do good, and I don't think that there's too many things it actually does do well, but it hits the emotional chords really well.
Yeah. I think that's the one thing that they did do in this film is they, I think through a number of different methods they've made it very appealing to quite a wide demographic, despite how, as I said before, I don't know how successful it's been at the box office, but I think through a number of different methods in the production of the film, and especially the music and soundtrack, I think they've tried to make this film as appealing to as wide an audience as possible, and also to draw that audience in through very, very evocative themes. You find yourself identifying with the characters very, very quickly and feeling the emotions of the characters very, very quickly. And, as you said, there's a lot to criticize about the film. And there's a lot of stuff that's really been done badly. But in terms of, the success they've had with, pulling you in emotionally, getting you to identify with the plight of the characters. They've done an excellent job of that. I think they really have. And for that reason, I think, we're throwing out a word of caution there. It's very difficult to watch this film and remain completely objective.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's hard to watch this film and, oh man, it will hurt you. It's difficult. Yeah. It's a difficult movie. So again, we don't recommend actually watching this. But even without watching it, I think that this podcast is going to be very good in terms of because this film really was putting out some serious ideas. I think it was being used as a tool, really, and we'll get into that. But let's just do a quick synopsis of the film here. Basically, there's not much to it. There's a guy who's a blue-collar guy. He works as an armored truck driver.
Security guy.
Security guy. Yeah, and he's having financial woes, troubles, and he is invested in stocks. Things start going bad for him, and his stock investments really take a plunge. He starts losing all his money. Meanwhile, his wife is sick, and she needs treatment, and there's extra money there. He doesn't have the money to pay for that. He's just
the health insurance has stopped paying out as well.
Yeah. Just pick it up from there. But where does the film go from there?
Yeah, basically, so things just get worse and worse and worse, and basically it's just this, it shows this hardworking, the guy's an ex-military guy as well, so he served his country as a patriot, etc., but he's working so hard, he's putting in long hours, and he's trying to support his wife, and they've got plans to have a baby, but the health insurance company is basically dishing out policy saying, well, okay, now that your condition is required treatment, it's exceeding such and such an amount of money, we're no longer going to pay for it.
Yeah.
Therefore, the treatment's got to come out of his own pocket, and so he starts to lose money. And then, of course, because he's invested in the big mortgage bubble, the whole 2008 financial crash, he basically gets screwed on his investments, and he winds up actually owing money rather than having made any money, and things just go from bad to worse, to the point where, his wife, is sick, and she's so stressed out, and she gets into such a state that she actually ends up committing suicide and dies.
That part was difficult.
Very, very difficult to watch. Very, very intense, and very, very sad and emotional. And basically, things just, and of course, this is just after he's lost his job. He's been laid off because of the lawsuits that are going on with him. Due to his investments basically, falling to pieces, he loses his job as a security officer because they can't have anyone with financial issues working for an armored van that literally carries cash around the city.
That's right. Yeah.
It's a risk to them, so they fire him, so he loses his job, and basically things just go from bad to worse. He's working as hard as he can. He's putting on a brave face to the world. He's just a hard-working American man. He's just trying to make a future for himself and take care of his wife and hopefully start a family. And yet he's just being screwed from every possible angle, from the judges to the lawyers to the banks, to certain laws, to everything, and things just go from bad to worse to the point where, he's lost all his money, he's in debt, he ends up getting his home foreclosed, he has to, he's evicted, he loses his job, his wife dies, it's like he reaches the absolute bottom of the pit, and then basically decides to strike back at the system.
Yeah.
And he goes on a vigilante rampage, literally just shooting out banksters around Wall Street, because he's had military experience, and because he's got access to, through sort of, shall we say, backhanded channels and old friends from the military, he's able to procure, like high quality military grade ordnance, machine guns and sniper rifles and, automatic handguns and all grenades and all types of stuff. And he just goes on a literal, a bloody rampage, across the street, just shooting up every person. He finds people like his lawyer. He finds people like, people he's worked with in terms of his banking and his mortgages and investments and all the rest of it, and he basically just shoots them all. And not only them, but he shoots a whole bunch of civilians as well, like innocent people too, people just working in offices. And it's like the classic case of so many of these so-called shooter incidents we've seen over the past few years, and it basically ends where he gets one of these guys. And he gets the CEO of a corporation in a tight spot, in his office with a gun pointed to him, plays a bit of a wee game with him, and basically tricks him into taking the gun from him at a point where the SWAT police burst into the door and find the CEO of the bank pointing a gun at this guy and think that the CEO of the bank is actually the shooter. And so the actual guy who's done all the shooting gets off scot-free, and that's the end of the film.
Yeah, the ending of this film is just remarkable, and I think we'll get back to that and how just ridiculous that is. But from a character standpoint, I mean, you've got the main character, Jim Baxford is the character's name. He is the archetypical man.
The archetypical blue-collar, fucking hard American guy.
He works hard, and even beyond that, he is just the man that is, his job is to, protect his wife, to provide. He is everything that a man, archetypical man, you think of being. Yeah. And they get the actor. The actor is a very square-jawed, deep voice. He's a brawny guy. So
lots of stubble.
Yeah. And so you see him and like, okay, this is a man. Okay, that's clear.
Real man's man.
Real man's man. And the whole time he keeps getting hit with. He's doing the right thing all the time, and he's being a man in the proper sense, but he just can't get ahead because people keep screwing him over, and the viewer is sitting there going, okay, what's this guy going to do about it? Because he can't just sit here and take this. He's a man. He's got to fight back sooner or later. So the whole time they're kind of playing to that archetypical thing within. What do you think of that?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there was possibly the strongest sort of evocative theme within the film is especially for males, is the way they show this man, having to, having such a strong desire to work and to protect, and especially, as men, when, we feel a sense of responsibility and wanting to protect, our families and our children and things like that. It's just, it strikes a very deep emotional chord when we see, a man who could be any one of us, going through such, horrific troubles where he's working so hard and he's got that, inbuilt, biological, urge to protect, and yet at the same time you can't, and it's a very, very troubling thing to watch, because it hits the deepest chords of our emotions, as you said before, in terms of identifying with the plight of a man basically trying to be a man and not being able to,
Yeah. So it's playing to how the troubles of the modern world, which are very real, and that's the thing about this movie. It lays out incredibly real problems and real situations, and it's very truthful in that sense. So it goes like, these are the problems, and it puts a character up against those problems in a hypothetical situation that is actually many real people play out. What happens when the average person is faced with these problems coming down from on high, like from Wall Street?
Well, I mean, the average person, ends up losing, everything basically. We've seen this, and this has been going on for years now, since 2008, especially. People, who used to live in houses that they owned, living in shacks on the street, or being homeless, or living in their cars, and being absolutely destitute and just living in poverty and subsistence the whole time. That's the result that this whole so-called financial crash has had on people. And so there's so many people watching this film will be able to relate to the experiences of the character in such a direct way, not only because of the emotional sort of aspects that I spoke about before, but also purely the socioeconomic conditions through which he, entered the situation that he was in. I mean, that is the exact problem that so many people have, is that they made investments, in, basically, bad loans, bad investments, bad, they invested in dodgy proproperties,
and they have no recourse. There's nothing that they're able to do.
Yeah. Because I mean, it's just an investment. It's Wall Street. It's a stock market. It's a big casino, and if you lose, you lose.
That's it, the investment rep character, the stockbroker guy in this, has a line where he goes, "You pay to play," and he throws that out there. Yeah. So that's the idea. This. Just the reality thrown into this movie, and the very real phenomenon, I think, is what makes it powerful, and what makes its purpose. if this movie does have a purpose, it makes it work better by making it more real. Well, one of the other aspects of this is that they put in clips, like news clips. They show George W. Bush. They show Obama. They show these news clips that they're not fictional news clips, because a lot of times you watch a movie and you see the President of the United States and some actor. And then immediately for me, I'm like, that's not the president, that's an actor. And so it takes you out of that realm of reality, where here we are seeing the real presidents, we're seeing real news stories, and they're referencing real financial institutions the whole time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, there's so many real, actual references they put in there. I mean, that's one of the things people will notice if they have watched the film, is that it's constantly. It constantly features basically news clips in the background. You know, there's always a TV on the background somehow with a news, like a news, anchorman or whatever, or journalist, sitting at some desk or on the street or whatever, talking to some disenfranchised person about, or some financial analyst or stockbroker or whatever it may be, about how, the system's crashing and the system needs to change. And they even reference the Occupy movement.
Yes,
and,
yes, they do.
They talk about that. And there's so much. I mean, the type of commentary, in these news clips they feature, callers calling into certain shows and things like that. And the type of commentary and the type of rhetoric that you hear in the script and the film is so reminiscent of things that we've heard genuinely from genuine people on real news shows, and also in real protests and things like that as well. So it is a very realistic scenario. For that reason.
I think if we're going to talk about the purpose of this movie, the one that's riding in the undercurrent, and you're not supposed to. You're supposed to only subconsciously really get the real purpose of the movie, which I think is likely the case here. I think that they're placating the Occupy movement in part and giving the Occupy movement an answer, because anybody who's in the Occupy movement or any sort of alternative movement at all is familiar with the concept of okay, we're sitting here, we're talking. We've been talking all this long time. Now it's time for action. You always have these people come up. It's time for action. Let's make it happen. And, they'll start talking about getting violent. And so you get into all this mess. Oh, what do you think about this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you said that, it reminded me a lot of Alex Jones, and I haven't listened to Alex Jones in a long time, but it just that whole, it's what you've described and others have described as revolutionary rhetoric. Even though someone like Alex Jones will most probably have reviewed this film at some point briefly and said, violence is not the solution. I don't support violence, and blah 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 blah. But you can say one thing, but you can give it a completely different message through all of your other actions. And this film and this whole attitude towards the system reminded me very much of the Patriot Movement as a whole. With people like Alex Jones being at the helm of that movement, so to speak.
The worst elements of it, the people who would, because there are people within these movements who are just sort of. They want to become violent. They're looking for an excuse to do that. That's what they want. That's what they're looking for.
Well, they need to vent all those frustrations, because if people feel so powerless, and this is one of these things that's brought up again and again in the film, is, they're constantly showing you the contrast between the indulgent, luxurious, and stress-free sort of, recreational almost lifestyle of the Wall Street bankers and, financial, advisors and investment institution people and all these different, people in the financial sector, versus, the struggles of the common man. They're constantly showing you the contrast, of how, of basically how easily and these people live, and the show, and people laughing about how much money they're making and how the public are getting screwed and how it's all a big joke, versus the common man, struggling just to get by. And a lot of people have genuinely been feeling like that for a long time, And I mean, even I can even relate to feeling like that, Believe me, I think we've all had periods in our life at some point, we're working so hard, and we're trying so hard to make ends meet and to get things done and to move forward, but it's like, at every turn, it feels like we're being screwed, and so many people are feeling like that right now, right across the world, but most especially in the US, and so they constantly make a point of basically, illustrating this contrast and tapping into that, this wider sense of disenfranchisement and anger toward the system in general, especially the banking sector, throughout the film. So it's very, very prevalent.
I think an important point to mention here is that there is a taboo on calling out the system. And the reason that there is a taboo on it is due to propaganda primarily. So anytime anybody questions, Wall Street or whatever, it's seen as like somebody questioning the system itself and how could you? And that's just the generic version of it. So the problem becomes in any sort of truth movement or whatever is, how do you go about questioning the status quo without instantly getting shot down? And in this movie, I think they use an interesting device where, the main character has friends that he eats lunch with when he's on break, and a couple of the friends are police officers. That's right. Yeah, remember that? And they're sitting there having a conversation, and he's saying how Wall Street's all corrupt, and he's losing money on his investments. This is nonsense, and you'll find that the police officers are totally agreeing with him, and they're saying, yeah, those guys are crooked. You know what we do all day? We go after homeless people, and we basically waste our time while the real criminals are on Wall Street.
Yeah, there's a lot of that in the film, not just from the primarily, I suppose, from conversations like that, when he's sitting with his buddies at lunch, there's two police officers with a fellow security guard as well, so there's four of them, and they meet for lunch each day and basically talk about how they're all losing their money and the relationships are failing and how they're working so hard, but, the Wall Street, crooks are in charge and are ruining everything for them, and, so there's a lot of that going on through the film, not just through those characters, though. It's played out in a lot of other different ways as well through this constant commentary.
I think that the fact that it is police officers as that character and they're agreeing that the system is corrupt, that makes it okay in the viewer's mind to start questioning the premise that, Wall Street really is corrupt, because it's coming from insiders of the system.
From an authority figure,
So it makes it okay. The viewer of this film is like, the police are saying it's corrupt. Therefore, I am myself able to agree with this. Where otherwise, you have that taboo is still there where, is it okay to question the system? I've been told it's not okay. But then they give you these devices that just let you just completely go with it and go like, this is total corruption. They give you permission.
They're giving you permission basically to basically say to say that the king has no clothes. But there's an interesting little relationship there with him and the policeman, because I guess we're sort of jumping towards the end of the film here, but
that's okay.
When he goes on when he starts his rampage, basically, and he's I don't know how long the course of this rampage lasted, maybe a few weeks or whatever, but anyway, once he starts on his rampage, and there's this front page news of top investment banker gunned down in his car park, or top lawyer ends up being run over by a taxi, and it's basically this guy is causing all the problems. He's sitting there at lunch with his buddies, and he basically the two policemen are talking about, oh gosh, we're gonna have to find this guy and we're gonna have to track him down and he's gonna cause havoc and blah blah blah, even though they've said that Wall Street's full of crooks and that there's still policemen, so they have to say that they're still paid to and motivated in some way to find the culprit of the crime. And he actually says at one point, well, I can solve that problem for you right now. It's me. And he admits it to them, and they basically just laugh it off and say, "Oh, you're joking, weren't you?" And he doesn't say anything. He just smiles, and they just assume joking. And then you'll notice at the end of the film where he's basically done this very sort of cunning little, I mean, okay, it was done pretty badly, as you say. He's done, you know, a cunning little switch around where, he makes this, like, the top CEO of this investment, you know, firm basically appear to be the shooter rather than himself. You know, there's a scene where he's being escorted from the crime scene, you know, after this big shootout by his friend, the policeman. And the policemen both look at him, and they both exchange this gaze for about 10 seconds where they realize that, oh, whoops, you know, oh my God, you know, he was really the culprit and he's managed to get away from it somehow. But because he's our friend, we're just going to pretend to, you know, leave it and let him go.
And beyond just that, it's not just that he's their friend, it's because he is morally in the right and justice is being done finally.
Justice is being done, and that's the line at the end of the film. You know, just after that little scene where, you know, he's being escorted, you know, out of the building, you know, after this big firefight, you know, or you know, with the SWAT teams and everything, you know, and he has that sort of moment where he looks at his police buddies and they sort of silently realize, you know, that, oh my God, he was telling the truth when he said that he was the shooter, he was the one who was doing all the crime, you know, and they sort of, you know, let him go anyway. That's basically the final scene of the film.
Yeah.
And basically right after that, you know, the film ends and it's basically just a final statement from him saying, I'm still alive and I'm still out there. I'll keep killing, a soldier of the people. Yeah. When the government, the banks, and the judges fail in their duty, I will not fail in mine. You know?
Yeah.
It's pretty terrible, but you know, that's the final line there. You know, he gets away with it, and it's all about, you know, him being morally right, you know, and despite the fact that he's, you know, slaughtered so many innocent people in his you know, rampages, you know, he's still, you know, basically, you know, promoting himself as being morally in the right, and his actions of being morally justified, you know, not just through that, but through the fact that, you know, the policeman basically let him go. You know?
Yeah, it's amazing. So, it's the messages that are sent in this. You get the final message being that this killer, he turns, for sure, his motivations were all correct, but where he ends up going and becoming a killer is completely not correct at all. There's nothing that's good about doing that. However, that's what this movie is. The whole answer to these problems that everybody can relate to is to become violent. And beyond that, he gets away with it. So the guy who takes this as the answer, he becomes violent. Not only does he do it, he gets away with it, and he becomes the hero. So he's the hero. Yeah. He's victorious. There is no recourse for his action because he's doing justice, and
he's doing justice. Yeah,
because he's in the right. Therefore, he gets away with it. It's just it blows me away that that the producers allowed these sorts of messages to go through. I mean, it blows my mind.
Well, I think we've seen this type of thing before in films like Batman, you know, where, you know, there's this sort of, they show this sort of, almost a divide within the police forces and the judiciary and all the rest of it, you know, as to whether this vigilante Batman, I'm talking about the most recent series of films, you know, you know, where there's this sort of debate going on as to whether, okay, well, you know, he's a great, you know, protector of the city, and he's doing the real justice that we can't do because, you know, we've been infiltrated by the mob and they're basically running things, and everything's crooked, and so it's great we've got a guy like Batman around, whereas others are like, oh, he's a vigilante and he needs to be stopped. But you know, the general message on the whole, of course, with Batman, you know, through all of the last three films, is that, you know, he's morally justified in doing whatever he does, you know. And I think, you know, this is the first film, you know, outside of that universe that we've actually seen, you know. I mean, there's films like Die Hard and all the rest of it where, you know, but the difference being with those types of vigilante films is, you know, there's never the killing of innocents. You know, it's always very specific to point out that, you know, we're killing the bad guys, you know, and that's it. No, you know, we'll be saving the good guys. Whereas in this film, basically, you know, it's far more just wanton killing of everyone who might be involved with the financial industry. In some way,
There's some, it gets cartoonish cartoonish in the killing.
Yeah.
It almost reaches RoboCop level, not quite.
Yeah.
It almost gets back to that where, okay, at first he's picking his targets, the DA that's crooked, he kills him, and he even kills him sort of accidentally at first, and that sort of gets him going, oh, I can get away with this. But he starts targeting, all the big people. But then towards the end, he just starts shooting at everybody. He's like, well, now that I'm here, let's just kill everybody that I see. And there's this scene where he's up in a parking garage, posted up with a sniper rifle, and across the street. You know what I'm talking about? And there's the building, the office building, and you just see people in the windows, and he just starts picking them off. And it's so stupid, really. It's like a video game almost. It is. It's exactly like that, because you see somebody pop up like it's Duck Hunt or something, and he just shoots them, and then there's another person, and he just indiscriminately just takes everybody out.
Yeah, it is. It is really silly. It's like there haven't been that many. I don't know, real examples of a mass shooting on that level. We've seen in the films like that one Jack Reacher that Tom Cruise was in earlier on the year, but apart from that, it does remind one of things like do you remember the Washington sniper?
Years back. I remember that. You're talking about the what was the name?
It was a guy and his kid. Who basically drove around for like 5 days, just knocking people off indiscriminately.
There was at the same time that was going on, there was another sniper in Columbus, Ohio. I was living in Columbus, Ohio at the time, and there was a lot of the same thing going on at that time. I remember that. There was very odd goings on with that.
Yeah, very, very odd goings on. That would be another conversation altogether. But I think this is the first time we've seen this whole concept of indiscriminate killing, portrayed in a film in the way that it has been in this film, at least. There's been similar incidents in the real world, not quite to that level. In fact, nowhere near that level, really. There's been similar incidents in other sort of vigilance type films, but again, the focus has always been on, the saving of innocent lives and the killing of the bad guy, the terrorist or the whatever, the villain. There's a little bit of that in this film. There are some scenes where, for example, he will, point a gun at somebody and ask them, what the job is, and say, right, you're lucky today. The guy will say, oh, please don't kill me while my wife's pregnant, and he'll say, okay, all right, just get the fuck out of here, and he'll spare them. So, he's not a completely bad guy, and women as well. There was a few incidences where, he had the opportunity to kill a woman, but, I think perhaps through, his own experience of losing his wife, he was probably hesitant to do that. So they throw that in there. They sort of, it's almost like an appeasement, effort to sort of say, look, it's not all bad. The guy is sort of being a little bit choosy with his targets. But then there's those scenes like you described before, where he's, standing in that car park, just literally just shooting up a whole town square.
Yeah. And again, it takes on the quality of a video game. You and I and Tom Secker just recently were talking about video games. To me, it really emulated like a first-person shooter or something. It's like a movie version of that. It's like, hey, look, you recognize this, don't you?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, if it moves, shoot it. Yeah. Just if it moves, push the button or pull the trigger. That's it. Simple as that. No thought required.
And I'd have to say that the base instinct in us that exists in all of us, but certainly there's people out there who want to fulfill that. In years past, the way to fulfill that would be, you join the military and then you're sent off to the Middle East or wherever, and it's socially acceptable to go fulfill that bestial, dark, violent urge within you. But now it's sort of turning around and domesticating that violent impulse within us.
Well, that's really funny because there's actually a scene in the film. I can't remember the actual scene, but basically it's another one of these scenes where they've got a TV on in the background and some sort of like news show where they've got people calling in, or the some calls rhapsodizing about whatever, or they've got some guest on, some expert on that they're interviewing. And there's even a segment there where basically they talk about how the system, the whole financial system is failing and it's corrupt, and that he says that, I really support this vigilante, and I'm glad the bankers are dead. And the host of the show is saying, well, that's not the way forward. Violence isn't the solution. And this caller is saying in the background, he's saying, no. Well, how come violence is the solution overseas? How come when the U.S. government wants to do things, it will go and kill people in Iraq and Afghanistan, yet violence is not okay back home?
Yeah.
And he puts that whole argument out there. So it's interesting you should bring that up, because that was directly actually mentioned in the film.
Yeah, maybe it subconsciously got to me, and that's why I'm mentioning it here again.
Yeah, who knows? Yeah, I mean, as I said, the film is so full of. I mean, it's almost constant. Basically just newsreels and news clips. Some of them real, some of them obviously fictionalized, but of people basically calling up to news shows and talking about how angry they are at the banking system, and how we need a new system, we need to, basically some kind of revolutionary act to take place, or we support this shooter and we feel his pain, we're on his side, and it's constantly throughout the film, this rhetoric's coming across, the system is broken, the bankers are all corrupt, blah, blah, blah. And, but again, of course, it's all about the banks, not just the government, it's like, don't criticize the entire establishment, just criticize Wall Street, and just going to shoot at people on Wall Street.
Well, important point on this is they specifically mention the free trade capitalist system at the end.
Yeah.
And they really they frame that as the enemy that he was going after.
Yeah, there's an amazing speech at the end, basically where he's got this guy. The CEO of this investment firm that has been basically responsible for all the problems he's had, and I think the firm is actually called Huxley Investments. There's actually it's only shown in one little scene. You'd miss it if you blinked. But there's one little scene near the beginning of the film where he's walking into this building to try and see this guy, and his secretary basically says no, he's too busy, and he's always he doesn't get to see him. But there's a sign. I'm pretty sure there's a sign on the wall where it says Huxley Investments. Sure. So I found that quite interesting. But anyway, so he goes into at the very end of the film, the scene that I was describing before, where he basically he puts a gun on the table and ends up, tricking the CEO of Huxley Investments to pick up the gun and point it at him just as the SWAT team enters the room, therefore making him look like the victim and the banker look like, the vigilante, the target, the bad guy, this little trick, this awful piece of cinema that they put out at the end of the film, Basically, in that scene, before that event happens, basically the CEO is basically rhapsodizing about the glory of capitalism and free trade, imperialism, and how corruption and greed are the natural driving forces of civilization. He talks about how this is the natural order of things, and how this is why the cream will always rise to the top, and how the strong survive and the weak die off. All this kind of stuff, and social Darwinist view of things, So
he has no remorse for winning in the system himself. He's like, hey, look, I did what anybody would do. I won, I took advantage, and I'm proud of it.
Yeah, and he says that, he actually says that is patriotism. That he said that is true American heroism. He actually says that. He says that, taking advantage of people, manipulating and screwing and conning and lying and stealing their way up to the top. And he also mentions the fact that, of course, that, he references all these other people, like he actually says, the Rockefellers, the Carnegies, all these rich families,
that is so important. He rifles off in about 15 seconds conspiracy theory version of history. He gives it to you, and here it is.
Yeah, he literally, he talks about, the Rockefellers and the Carnegies and all the big, banking families and how they've controlled the world through, basically manufacturing and controlling and directing conflicts, to gain access to resources and basically do the world takeover. And, he basically outlines, the last, 100 years of the formation of the New World Order, literally.
Yeah. And so he's telling you that the system, all the major players in the system were corrupt. And therefore, so this is part of the whole point of the film, is that, okay, if we're living in this entire system which is corrupt, how does a hero win? Because a hero would become corrupt themselves, would they not, if they're working within the framework of the system? So it requires the anti-hero character to come up and rise against what has been deemed good up until this point. So we get the anti-hero idea.
Yeah, exactly. And he does actually say, he basically references, as I said before, all of these names, Rockefeller, Carnegie, Morgan, the rest of them, the whole bunch of them. And he says, he basically, I can't remember exactly how the script went, but he said something along the lines of, these ruthless acts of capitalism and greed and murder and genocide and all the rest of it basically make these people American heroes, and he's proud to be one of them,
That's exactly it. Yep, that's exactly it. And he mentions specifically in these words the free trade capitalist system. He mentions that. And so we see that as the enemy. It's given as the enemy. And I would point out here that if this film is trying to placate the Occupy movement, they're saying the same thing for the most part. For the most part, it's the free trade capitalist system, which is the big enemy. And then, how do you go about fighting the free trade capitalist system? That's the big confusion within the Occupy movement, again, within a movement. Like, what do we do about this? And,
exactly.
Well, what do you do? This film gives you an answer what to do in one way, does it not?
I think it gives more than just one demographic an answer. I mean, it's almost an answer for in one way the Occupy movement, which was predominantly through the big NGOs and financiers behind that movement. There was a big socialist undertone, shall we say, to the Occupy movement, and at the same time, so obviously, as you said before, I think it would definitely placate and appease to that audience and give them, basically, it would confirm their own convictions that the free trade capitalist system was in fact the enemy, whilst at the same time giving the disenfranchised, sort of ex-military veteran patriot, of which there are many out there, basically a solution to the same problem, so it's given both sides of the argument, like the left and the right, shall we say.
Absolutely.
Yeah, basically a conclusion as to what the problem is, so it's like for the right it was, well, you've got to get violent, you've got to get some guns and go in there and shoot the place up, and for the left it's kind of like, well, we've had our convictions confirmed here, it is in fact this awful system of free trade and capitalism that is the problem. And so I think it's catered to multiple demographics in that way.
The main point is, if you are in some countercultural movement that is questioning the system and you're wanting to bring some good change and reform about, then this movie is designed for you. And it's hoped that you will be there cheerleading the hero and going, yeah, this is great. Finally, that's what they want.
Yeah, that's it. That's what they want, want to evoke as much emotion as possible, and as much of the same kind of, for or against, dialectical thinking, as before, we're either, you one of us or you one of them, and there's no in between,
I think it deserves to be mentioned here. We have the subject of mind control, which is a vast subject and a difficult subject too, but I think it deserves to be brought up here, at least somewhat. You've got a concept within that there are, you've got these mind-controlled assassins oftentimes, and they'll be given trigger words, and oftentimes the triggers will be in books, like Salinger's Catcher in the Rye, just by reading that book. They'll read a certain line, or somebody will call them on the phone and read them a certain line of the book, and then they will just remotely go carry out programmed response. That's the extreme end of things. I think the concept of triggers is very real, at least to an extent. But certainly, I just wonder if in some sense this film is meant to be inspirational for people to actually do this sort of thing, if it could be used as some sort of trigger, or if it's just too overt to even be that. I don't know.
Well, I don't know, and I think, I mean, I don't know about the whole mind control aspect of it, and you know, the whole concept of there being, you know, some kind of subliminal triggers in that film for, you know, for certain, you know, people, unwitting patsies who may be out there.
It's almost too overt to fall into that category. It may have been wrong for me to say that.
Yeah, I think probably too overt to fall into that category, but at the same time, it's still triggering a very, very strong emotional response in a huge section of the audience.
That's it. That's exactly what I meant.
That is the trigger, is because we can all identify so closely with the plight of these characters and the situations and the emotions that they're going through. You know, that, you know, a film like this could really trigger. You know, especially among people who have really, you know, hit rock bottom and who are really having hard times. You know, a film like this could trigger some kind of, you know, limbic, violent reactionary response. You know.
Yeah. Could it actually inspire people to do the things in this film, at least even to any extent? Is it going to inspire people?
That's the question. That's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, we don't know for sure, but I think that they have gone to lengths in this film to not make sure, but to at least, you know, have that as a possibility because of the amount of evocative themes and prescient geopolitical and socioeconomic themes in this film. You know, I think that, you know, it's very, very possible that, you know, this film perhaps has been designed in some ways to actually, you know, to trigger certain reactions from people in the public, you know,
exactly.
Especially from the Patriot Movement, you know.
Yeah, I know. It's just so, the movie is so extreme in its themes and so extreme in the message it sets across. In that, okay, you've got this guy who he becomes the killer and he kills everybody and he's the anti-hero in doing so, and he gets away with it, and he is put up on a pedestal as the ultimate hero for doing it. It's just, it gives the viewer the message that, like, look, this is the right thing to do, and if in doing this one gets away with it because and the reason that they get away with it is because they are in the right and they're just, so justice is always done. And look, it gives the viewer, like, certainly a naive viewer, it would inspire them. I'd have to think. Yeah,
it would inspire them. It would give them a sense of a resolution and of justice as well, like almost like a vicarious sense of justice, and seeing this guy who they identify with so heavily on such a strong emotional level, you know, go against the system and get his revenge, and so the viewer can vicariously experience that sense of revenge and the sense of getting away with the act as well, through watching the film. So I think there's probably a vicarious element to it there.
Well, hopefully, in best case scenario, it is vicarious, and that's where it ends. And people sort of come to this sort of catharsis that's been designed here through fiction, and then they leave it at that. Like, oh, I feel better about the whole thing now, and all those guys have been dealt with. Okay, I can move on now. But I have to wonder could this be inspiring to some mentally ill person who is in some sort of, or who at least is said to be part of some countercultural movement. I don't know. It's just so bizarre to me, this whole thing.
The whole thing is very bizarre. It was a very bizarre film, and I think, I tend to, when I watched it, I got the feeling that it was catering and speaking to more than one demographic, you know, and in a number of different ways. And so I think it could affect different demographics in different ways, you know, as I described before with the whole, you know, the left and the right and the conclusions that people from those, you know, demographics would draw from this film. But, you know, at the same time, it's, I think, there's definitely so many more sort of demographics out there that will have, you know, either have gotten some sense of inspiration through this film, possibly, or maybe a sense of catharsis and relief, possibly, you know, some sense of something anyway. You know, I think it's definitely meant to leave people with a very strong emotional impression you know, the what should we call it, you know, the socioeconomic predicament, you know, that is the financial system, you know, especially in the States and Wall Street, you know. So I think, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't know enough about, you know, obviously it's so hard to say, you know, who produced the film and who had what say and what was done, and, you know.
Yeah, I would have liked to look more into the producers and all that. I didn't do any of that. That would be a valuable thing to do.
Yeah, no, I should have done a bit more of that myself. I had a brief look at it, but I didn't see any immediately recognizable names, you know, apart from a couple of the actors, and so I just kind of moved on. You know, it's so hard to tell, but, you know, it felt to me as if that this film had been, you know, quite deliberately made in such a way as to appeal to, you know, as wide a group of demographics as possible, you know, in terms of the, you know, general feelings of, you know, disenfranchisement that people feel and anger that people feel towards, you know, the financial establishment, you know, so to speak.
An important detail that we have to mention here is that okay, he's in the midst of his final killing spree. He just did the bit where he was up in the parking garage and he's picking people off video game style. He's walking up to the building now, and what does he do? He puts on this white mask.
Yeah,
the white mask. Yeah, and
like the horror film.
Yeah, well, that in part, he puts on the mask. To me, I thought it was kind of silly. I'm like, okay, he's kind of been walking around with a gun already, with a mask off. He's been killing people left and right, and now he decides to put this mask. It didn't make sense to me there, but to me, that white mask looked familiar. It sort of, I think it's emulating the Guy Fawkes mask, which has become so popular in counterculture.
Yeah, I actually thought that as well. That's when I first saw the mask. Like, there's a scene in the film where before he actually puts the mask on, it's like, I don't know, you see it like lying on a desk, or you see him unpackaging it or something, or, you know, you see it before he actually puts it on. And when I first saw it, I actually thought it was a Guy Fawkes mask because it looks so similar. Yes. It basically looks like the Guy Fawkes mask, but without the moustache, basically. That's it. And the eyebrows. It's just all white, you know. So take the Guy Fawkes mask, take the anonymous mask, the anonymous brand, and remove the eyebrows and the moustache, and basically this is the mask that this guy decided to put on after he'd done a whole bunch of wanton killing, you know, so he could go and do some more killing, you know. Yeah. So it was very bizarre. Yeah, very bizarre.
To me, I think they are purposely emulating the Guy Fawkes thing. Again, it gets the audience more involved, the counterculture more placated. There's a scene where he just puts a mask on, then he gets in an elevator, and it's just a really weird bit of editing where they show this long shot of him in the elevator, and the elevator music's playing, and he's just standing there.
Yeah. Same with the SWAT team as well. They do that when the SWAT team is coming up after him about 5 minutes later. The SWAT team will get in the elevator, and they're just standing there with their guns, and there's just this like 10, 15 second shot of them all just standing there with this like quiet, calm elevator music playing in the background. They're all just sort of standing there silently. So there's two scenes where that happens actually, and that's very weird too. Yeah.
The part where the SWAT team's getting in there kind of seems like comic relief a little bit. But with him sitting there in the mask, it just didn't make sense to me. It didn't really like work for me as like an editing sort of thing. It was just a very bizarre choice. And I don't know if the purpose was to like sort of the viewer to meditate on the Guy Fawkes mask and profile, and to like really look at it and like sort of to just meditate on the mask and like, oh yeah, and like realize subconsciously that they'd seen it before and just kind of take in the mask. I don't know if that was the point, but it was just a very odd choice.
Yeah. It was a very, very odd choice, and I think again that was just to appease and draw in the interest and the sympathies of yet another demographic, i.e. the, shall we say, anonymous demographic, you know, to speak in the most broader sense possible, you know. You know, and again, that comes back to what I was saying before. I think that there's so many of these little details in the film which don't seem to make much sense, but when looked at as a whole, appear to be put in there so as to appease each demographic within the wider, shall we say, anti-establishment or you know, truth alternative media movement. You know, it's like every section of this movement has been catered to and has been included, and their views have been put across in some way, so as to basically make it appealing to them, and therefore make the solution and the you know, final conclusions that are drawn from the film, more palatable to them. I think that's possibly doing done.
So the broad range of countercultural groups are cheering this film on. It's their film. They're happy about it. But beyond that, the average viewer who is not a part of that, just the average person watching, is aware of these things because they're in the news. Everybody knows what Anonymous is. Everybody's seen the mask. Everybody recognizes it. It's symbolic. It's got symbolic power. So every person can recognize that immediately. And the average person is they're identified with the hero too. So they're cheering on. They're coming to cheer on these countercultural groups too. So it's them. It could be seen as a tool to make mainstream these supposedly counterculture anti-mainstream groups. So it's making them okay, and for the average person to kind of go, oh, okay, I see what those weird people were thinking all along. That maybe they're not so weird. Maybe they're a lot like me.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is a general trend that we're seeing in so many different areas, and it's something that Thomas Sheridan has described as the purple pill. And I've had discussions with him about this, and he's been talking about this whole concept a lot, of this whole idea of bringing, so-called conspiracy and anti-establishment and alternative media type content into the mainstream, and kind of just watering it down enough to the level that the general public will begin to accept it, and will take this kind of middle route. And so instead of, being completely, shall we say, proverbially asleep and just working in the system and being unaware of any of the real problems that exist, and being completely awake and critical and aware of what's going on, they're sort of creating this middle ground where people know that something's wrong, they can't really put their finger on it, but they're given a kind of a one size fits all solution to it, and some sort of middle ground countercultural movement. And I think that this film in some way lends credence to that idea by taking all of the sort of symbols and archetypes of all the different factions within the wider anti-establishment movement and incorporating them into this one film.
Yeah. Yeah. To me, just what you're talking about with the purple pill and the promotion of revolutionary rhetoric again to the average person, I think that this is the thing that we all need to be talking about in this. Whatever we want to call it, in the alternative media. This is the discussion I think that we all need to be having and trying to get to the bottom of what this phenomenon is, because to me this is being done purposely, and I think somebody wants the general population to become revolutionary and to bring about a revolution of sorts.
I absolutely believe that, and of course we've had, recently, most people will know about, Russell Brand's co-editing of the New Statesman magazine, which of course was a sort of a, not so much a revolutionary, but more of a Fabian socialist, front magazine that was set up back in the 60s, I believe, and then following him doing an editorial about the need for a revolution against the bankers and the corrupt system and all the rest of it. He went on the Jeremy Paxman show and basically called for a revolution on live television in prime time, which of course turned into a big, controversy and the big cause celeb, among sort of truth pundits and the rest of it, and rightly so. But again, I totally agree with you that this whole idea of bringing the idea of a revolutionary concept and normalizing the ideas that had previously been limited to within, so-called conspiratorial alternative media movements into the general public has definitely been something that has been happening a lot recently in so many different areas of media, and I think this film fits right into that category in many ways. Absolutely. I think it's been designed to have that same effect.
Yeah. And if we're going to boil down a purpose in doing all this and promoting revolution, I would speculate to say that the purpose would be to break down the system as it is now, bring about revolution to break down the current system in order to make way for the new system. I think that's what's being done.
That's what revolution has always been for. Revolution has, historically not been organized by the the destitute, angry proletariat, but more the educated middle to upper classes who simply want to leg up on the walls, and they want to overthrow the current regime because they want to occupy the seats of power.
There's always an intelligentsia involved.
There's always an intelligentsia involved. If you look back at so many of the revolutions, there's always an intelligentsia and usually a secret society connection as well. To overthrow the existing regime simply so that the educated intelligentsia can take their seats. The masses always end up being left in the same predicament as they were before, if not a worse situation than they were before. And so revolution has always been used to this end as far as history is concerned anyway, for the most part.
More and more, I've been feeling that even if we're talking about the truth movement, it's being used for this purpose. I don't know if we can properly say that the truth movement as a whole is a tool for this purpose to bring about revolution so that a new system can come in. But if it's not the purpose of it, then certainly someone out there is using it for that purpose. And that's my opinion.
Yeah, no, I absolutely think so. I agree with that completely. I mean, one document that we often refer back to in a lot of our conversations, and which you've included in your first film, was the DCDC Strategic Trends Report. Which basically outlined what the UK military and NATO's predictions were for, basically everything, in terms of, politics and economics and sociology and culture and all the rest, and resources and all the rest of it, over the next basically 20 to 50 years. And in that document, they actually talk about the fact that what they expect. And when I say expect, I think what they're really talking about is what they intend and what they want to happen, is for the middle classes and the lower classes as well to actually take up a revolutionary, almost sort of what they describe as a neo-Marxist mindset, against the system. So this is something that has been mentioned in military documents, and the same one we referenced last time again, where they actually say that they expect, or at least predict that the general public are going to take up some kind of revolutionary attitude towards the whatever predicament may lie ahead.
In a time of massive change, the prerequisite is that you have to make the condition of just absolute change acceptable and a desire in the average person. So the person has to desire change and want to oust all that is in favor of an ideal that is not.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just looking at this report here, and it's interesting. And it says this is on page 3 of the Strat Trends report. They basically say. There's a whole lot of it here, but they say that absolute poverty and comparative disadvantage will fuel perceptions of injustice among those whose expectations are not met, increasing tension and instability both within and between societies, and resulting in expressions of violence such as disorder, criminality, terrorism, and insurgency. They may also lead to the resurgence of not only anti-capitalist ideologies, possibly linked to religious, anarchist, or nihilist movements, but also to populism and the revival of Marxism.
My goodness.
So they actually say that.
Well, was that just a description of the movie we watched?
Yeah, I mean, exactly. That's what I'm talking about. Yeah, I mean, this is a military document which was published in 2007, and which basically makes what they call a whole bunch of predictions, which is, I personally think just a euphemism for what we're gonna make happen, what our plans are. And so, in reading that passage just there, I mean, as you say, we basically just described this whole film.
Yeah, and that's it. I mean, what more can you say? I think we really have hit what we want to say with this movie. Is there anything else that you want to mention on Assault on Wall Street?
Well, there's so many little things. I mean, it's interesting. It's hard to sort of think about what's important and what should be mentioned and what doesn't really merit mentioning. But I guess again, there's just so many little notes that people might want to think about. Because we also, I mean, we talked about how the whole revolutionary rhetoric aspect of this film how that ties into the whole sort of general temperament of the Patriot Movement in the U.S., which predominantly, at least, has a sort of a Christian background to it. And not obviously not in all cases and not for all people, but especially certain areas, and Alex Jones is always famous for he'll start acting like a pastor when he wants to if he's got certain people on and all the rest of it. So there's definitely a Christian element to that, and I found it very interesting that in this film that there was one point where they sort of catered to that demographic as well, because when he's at his wife's funeral, the pastor is basically reading a sermon about how death is.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, the pastor.
The pastor's reading a sermon about how death is, one of these unsolvable, quirks of fate, and one of these things that just. One of the acts of God that we'll just never be able to understand as human beings. We just have to learn to accept it, and we just have to learn to get on with our lives and stuff like that. But then it's funny because the sermon changes.
Yes, I noticed a distinct change. It starts as a hopeless message, and then it turns into an aggressive message.
Exactly. It starts as kind of a hopeless yet kind of comforting message about how death is just a natural part of life,
very
and
passive,
that these things happen.
Very
passive, and this is just the way things are, and we just have to have faith in God and all this kind of stuff. But then it changes quite markedly about sort of midway through it, where he starts talking about. I mean, I'm not sure if he's reading from any passages from the Bible or he's just making it up, but the pastor basically just starts talking about how we must seek out enemies, and we must destroy our enemies. We must fight for justice, and we must confront those who would, seek to undermine us or oppose us in any way whatsoever. We must, use the power of God to destroy the unjust and the evil and all this kind of stuff. And it's at that point there, basically, where the character in the film, has his moment where he basically makes the decision, from memory at least.
Yep.
It's at that moment where he makes the decision, right, I'm going to go and, seek justice with a gun.
Because, God's on my side. Let's do this.
God's on my side, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
That's exactly what's going on.
And, so it's after that sermon, they show him sort of, lying, sort of on the bed, and he's a tough guy. He's got all his tattoos, and he's quite well built, good physique and everything like that. So he's a real man's man. A lot of guys will identify with that, and he's tough, and he's like a soldier. He's ex-military. He's a veteran. He's got God on his side, and he's going to go out there and he's going to get justice done. He's going to see that the criminals are brought to justice, and that some form of equality and whatever it may be, is brought around or is brought about through his actions. So it's
the message is, this is what a man does.
This is what a man does, exactly. This is a man's man, and if you're a man's man, then this is something like this is what you need to do. So I think the only other thing is, of course, is whilst in one way they're sort of catering to appeasing and making suggestions in terms of what a solution might be for people who are in the same situation as this character who you identify with on an emotional level. On one hand, this sort of his actions are basically. They're justifiable. They're morally justifiable in this film. They're okay. What he's doing is okay, and he's got God behind him, and he's doing the right thing, and
he gets away with it.
He gets away with it, exactly.
Unbelievable to me.
But at the same time, that they also what I noticed was very interesting is they also sort of brought in the whole issue of guns as well, and the fact that this guy was ex-military, he was a veteran, and he was procuring assault rifles and grenades and automatic weapons, and stuff like that. And basically, I mean, when you're talking grenades and you look at some of the stuff that he does there, it is by definition terrorism. What they're saying there is, on one hand, it's like they're kind of basically placating and appeasing the patriot crowd and saying that, right, this is what you should be doing, and on the other hand, they're sort of saying that people who do this kind of stuff are terrorists. So
it's crazy.
There's so many little angles in there, but I mean, I could list off 100 other little things, but they're just, just little one-liners and observations that basically tie into all the things we've already discussed anyway.
And I think we need to, again, or I need to stress the message to listeners not to watch this movie. No need to watch this movie. I hope that you got something out of this conversation, but you really don't even need to watch the movie to get something out of this podcast, I hope.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah. It's basically about what has happened, since, shall we say, around about 2008 when we had the financial collapse, and all of the, social and socioeconomic and financial and socio-political issues that have come about since then.
Yeah.
It's basically
we've all lived it, so don't bother watching the movie.
Exactly.
Just don't do it.
It's like, it's basically just depressing at the end of the day. I mean, I found it really depressing and hard to get through, and I had to watch it. I couldn't watch it all in one go. Just because it was so intense, and I could relate to the characters.
I got mad at the screenwriters and just at all the people who made the movie at the point where the wife commits suicide. I'm like, I don't want to see this. Like, this is just I'm not happy about watching this right now.
Well, yeah, of course, and that it's little things like that which could be those triggers that you mentioned before. Those. I mean, as men, for us to be working hard to try and build a future and try and protect our loved ones, to have our wife commit suicide in the midst of all this chaos, is just. It's such a painful, horrific experience for any man to go through, and I think, in a way that, if there were any triggers, so to speak, in that film, I think the wife committing suicide would have been one of them. So speaking in the broadest sense possible, of course, if there were to be in there, I think that suicide would have been one of them, and I found that to be the most difficult part of the film to watch. I got quite upset, watching that part of the film, and I think any man would get upset watching that part of the film.
And you don't even have to be a man; it's just
any person.
Awful.
It was awful. Yeah, I mean, the whole film is just awful. It's basically just about things just going from bad to worse to even worse, and a guy just basically going on a vigilante rampage and getting away with it.
So I guess,
as the trailer suggests.
So I mean, there you have it. The film was Assault on Wall Street. Our podcast here is called Themes and Memes. We do one of these a month where we analyze a new movie. We may venture out from the realm of movies, but for now they've been movie reviews. So be sure to listen next month, and you can subscribe, to my podcast feed, Transresistor Radio, at ageoftransitions.com. I'm Aaron Franz. And then should be able to get to this podcast from your website too, Adam. Let them know about that.
Yeah. I mean, as I always say, I have cerebralrevolt.com up and running. I mean, it is basically just a bookmark worthy site at the moment. There's nothing much there. It's kind of more like a holding page, I'm still learning web design, so it's going to take me a while to get that up. But be assured, within the next month or two, once I've had a bit of space and some time to actually work on this thing properly, I will have that website up and running, and I'll be putting all the content that I've done up on there, plus a whole bunch of other stuff as well. So yeah, please do bookmark that and check back later on.
Yes. Yeah. So ageoftransitions.com, cerebralrevolt.com. This was Themes and Memes. I'm Aaron Franz. We'll see you all next time. Take care.
Great interview, Aaron. We'll speak to you soon.